Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And Tio, Dan, and Day, I appreciate you all being here. As everybody knows, in craft beer professionals, I love it. We really try to draw attention to important topics that don't get enough focus. And Tio, that looks great for everybody who's listening rather than watching. He was bringing a nice little display to the CBP logo up in the right. So thank you for that. But we really try to touch on the topics that aren't given enough attention. And I believe cultural appropriation in craft beer is definitely something we need to talk about. So for the next hour today, we're going to dive deep into that, why it's happening, what we can do to make it better, and just craft beer diversity, equity, inclusion as a whole. These are conversations we need to be having. Every additional conversation to draw attention to this can be valuable to the industry we love so much. But first off, I want to start with some basic introductions. To my right, we have Tio. If you want to start us off, tell everybody who you are.
How's it going, you guys? I'm Tio Hunter, head of brewing operations, co-founder and COO of Crown Hops Brewing Company in Inglewood, California. It's good.
Appreciate you waking up for us today. Dan?
Good morning. My name is Daniel Jones. I'm with Stern & Eisenberg. We're a law firm on the Philly side of Pennsylvania. We represent craft brewers, everybody in the craft beer industry. We always like to say we obviously know the law, but we also understand craft beer culture, which really helps us, relate to our clients.
And Day, always a pleasure. Last time I saw you in here, I think you had a bright orange or bright pink drink in your hand. I don't think you're quite as crazy this morning. You've muted yourself as way, sir.
Yeah, a little bit calmer these days. Dave Bracey. I'm on the Pittsburgh side of Pennsylvania, and I'm the co-founder of Fresh Fest. I'm also a comedian and co-host of the Drinking Partners podcast.
So in you three's location, I know Dan and Day, you're fairly close. How's the world treating you with regard to the pandemic these days?
I mean, drugs help. So, shout out to the industry that we all know and love, getting us through this, January, dry or not.
And out west, Tio, how's everything for you?
It's tough, 80-degree weather. It's hard to not go out to the beach and get those sunsets. But, to be honest, I think, everybody's ramping up for this second wave, but excited about the vaccine. I believe in science. So at the end of the day, I'm excited for that first wave of vaccines to get out.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to double up on the vac. Give me two of them. If anybody don't want theirs, I'll take the extras. Yeah, just get one from them and then pass it on. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, definitely ready for that. Definitely ready for things to get better so we can all enjoy a pint together at a brewery somewhere across this great country. And I think it's going to be a better week, too. So let's keep it positive, everybody. But first, I kind of want to dive into a few pictures to demonstrate while we're here. And because we do have a lot of people who are, listening, we're going to go around in a circle. And Tio, we're going to start with you. I just want you to tell everybody what you see right now in this picture.
Yeah. Good old Evans. I see theft. There's no other way to put it.
What is the image you're looking at?
I'm looking at an image of a can by a brewery here in California that utilized the image of Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B. In addition to that, they used the acronym of their song as well. They use zero creativity. They use zero tact in using their image to promote a beer. And ironically, it's a bit of their MO. It's just, this is the first time that I've ever seen them do it from a cultural standpoint. This is a can called WAP. They say it's standard as wet ass Pilsner, but you can only see that if you turn the can around, which does not face Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B's image on the side of the can.
And if I have to say, it looks a lot like this image right here as well. And this is an image just as the album Cardi B album cover as well, and which looks once again very similar to the can art we just saw. And Dan, I'd like you to describe what you see in this image right here.
More of the same. I see what basically looks like a CD album cover. It's an obvious ripoff. They even have the parental advisory on there. So I see what's potentially a trademark infringement.
And what Dan's looking at, it says sipping on G&J Juniper IPA. It's a baby blue convertible with a character with a hop face leaning against the side of the car. And I'm going to switch to the next slide because, Dan, I'd like you to tell me what you see here.
Pretty much the same thing. This is actually Snoop Dogg in the music video. It seems like a pretty blatant and potentially what would be called a harmful infringement.
Yeah, it looks very, very similar to the can art we just saw. And Day, I'm going to go for you for one final one. This one's a little bit different, but I want you to describe what you see in this example.
Well, well, it says Milk Duds, which, and it's in the very same style as, the popular treat Milk Duds from Side Lot Brewery. It says that it's a chocolate and caramel porter. It's yellow background. Everybody's seen a box of Milk Duds. It looks like a box of Milk Duds, only it says porter underneath it. And what I'm looking at here now is a box of Milk Duds, only it doesn't have porter underneath it. It has actual Milk Duds.
Does it make you hungry?
Yeah, I could go for some Milk Duds at any time. They're a great snack.
Okay, we'll get rid of those pictures and get back to the conversation. But I just wanted to put those three examples up there because I think they're going to represent a lot of what we're going to dive into today. But my first question is, Tio, you mentioned it early on. You said lack of creativity. Why do you feel breweries are simply just taking ideas, whether it's art, whether it's lyrics, whether it's images, from other avenues and just popping their own cans? Where did we get to this point that lack of creativity became an innovative way to, build your brand?
Well, I think, and I'm sure Daniel will probably lean in on this as well. It really comes down to a lack of creativity, a lack of spending the resources and the money needed to create your own branding. What we're seeing is lazy branding, lazy creative. The irony is, you show that one image of a hop, leaning, or a guy, kind of looking thugged out, leaning against a 6'4" Impala. I actually don't have a huge problem with that, outside of the fact that if they're just, if it's zero reflective of their community, but at least they paid an artist to actually create something, and they're not, and they're actually, leaning on an idea, gin and juice, but they didn't call that product Gin and Juice by Snoop Dogg. The issue that I had with that WAP can is that it was a complete ripoff, and the danger is that people that have never seen craft beer before in their lives, specifically in my community, that may listen to WAP every day, or just have that as a part of their narrative. Everybody, after all, loves a wet ass. I don't know if but that said, what they're doing is they are going for individuals who would recognize the culture before they recognize a product, and that's a problem, specifically when you're just stealing from IPs versus actually creating something. It's lazy and it's cheap.
No, I agree to that. Dan, from your point of view, you're a craft beer fan yourself. Why do breweries feel the need to take this art from other places and put it on their cans?
From what I've seen and the brewers that I know, they're trying to come from a good place. They're creative people. If they're, creating the can art themselves, they're mostly just creative people trying to express that creativity. But, generally not understanding that what they're doing is wrong and it's appropriating Black culture.
Well, they know. They know what they're doing. Not to interrupt, but
hey, no, I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, and some of it harpens back, you know, especially when you have these 90s references, you know, they see it maybe as part of their own childhood culture, but 90s culture, you know, appropriated Black culture in a large way. So, you know, it's definitely wrong what they're doing. They just, you know, Tio says, you know, they know what they're doing. Sometimes I think they're running afoul with good intentions. That's definitely not always. But yeah, it's, and it really can get them in trouble pretty quickly when it comes to certain legal aspects.
And I also want to point out, because we did mention just stealing Black culture, it's not just Black culture. It's so many other cultures. It's any time you're putting someone else's image that doesn't really reflect you on your can, you're using that to essentially monetize your business. So while today's focus may be on some of Black culture, it applies to any culture that's being stolen, I believe. Now, Day, you know, you're a huge craft beer fan. You're doing great things these days, but why do you feel brewers feel it's okay to do this?
You know, I think that it's a combination. There's some folks like Tio was saying that know exactly what they're doing. It's easy, right? Like, I mean, it's just easy to put something on a can that's easily recognizable, and people go, "Oh man, I know what that is." I mean, that's what you're competing for shelf space, you know. So if you see, you know, and labels sell. So if you see an identifiable label, you're more likely to pick it up and go, "Well, what is this?" and buy it. I mean, simply because it's easily identifiable. You know, so, you know, now where that comes into a cultural appropriation, and the issue is the fact that, you know, I think the people do it. One, I mean, I think that's their main purpose. It's just to sell. Why does anybody do anything for a can label? It's because it sells, right? You know, but I think the issue is that they, you know, it's privilege, right? It's the fact that they don't have to think about the repercussions, right? I mean, like, they don't have to think about, you know, what happens if somebody, you know, gets caught doing this, or, you know, what about, you know, how does that affect the people that they're taking this from? You know, how does it affect the, you know, the Black women that are on that can? How does it affect the rapper that, you know, helped, you know, make that happen? And you know, or the family of the deceased that, you know, that owns the estate of Biggie. I mean, I'm sure, you know, if the estate of Biggie wanted to go wild, man, half the industry would be in trouble, you know? So, you know, but it comes from a place of privilege, right? I mean, like, you know, not to venture too off topic, but, you know, that's why we saw a Capitol rise last week, because they felt comfortable doing that shit, and they were right. You know what I mean? And if you're looking at the industry, thus far, they've been largely getting away with it. Not only are they getting away with it, but they're emboldened now, where it's like they're going even further. We're like, that Milk Duds can, like, that was not even like trying, like, you know, and it's a catch me if you can type mentality that's going on. And, you know, like I said, I think the biggest issue is they're not thinking about the repercussions that has, you know, when you have an industry that's full of a very homogeneous demographic. I mean, bearded white dudes make up, you know, the vast majority of the employment and ownership in this industry. Yet when you walk into, you know, a lot of these breweries, the cans, you know, reflect hip hop, the cans reflect, you know, women, the can reflects, you know, these various cultures and whatnot. The music is playing, it varies these cultures, but you look at the patronage and the ownership and you don't see any of that. And it's a privileged place to say, I'm going to utilize this culture, but then not have it reflect in any of the supply chain, you know, any of that, you know, that again, I think it's blatant just privilege. Some of them are doing it knowingly. Some of them are doing unknowingly, but all of them are doing it from a place of privilege.
I think the scariest part is when they do it unknowingly, when they just put an image on a can and don't think anything's wrong with it. That actually scares me, because it represents just a lack of complete business knowledge. I mean, we all learned when we were in third grade, you don't steal someone's answers off their little test next to you on the desk. You know, it's essentially stealing, and stealing is wrong, just to say it out front. So it's frustrating that we see brewery owners that feel the need to do this.
Oh, I mean, it's also sad coming from an industry that prides itself on creativity and originality, right? You know what I mean? Like you want people to believe that you as a brewery are making something and pushing the industry forward by putting on a tired old 90s label on it. That doesn't make any, by doing something that somebody already did, you're proving that you're somehow more original and different from the other guy. It slaps. It's hypocrisy. At the end of the day, it's with all this creative talent, and I'm sure, especially you have folks like Stone running around, like suing folks for this, that, and defending their intellectual property, in this industry or whatever. And then you have these little guys that are like, mad because they're coming after them because they said Stone on this, and like we could get in it, into that whole thing or whatever. But ultimately, there's a lot of hypocrisy on that issue versus, again, that WAP can. Like,
it's funny Dave brings up Stone, and it's funny because they went after cats, Stone, Keystone Light, actually, to be specific about that, but then also have a SKU themselves called Notorious POG, so, I mean, it's kind of like, I think also what we're looking at is an industry that for generations has lacked diversity and lacked inclusion and lacked, I think, the term, it being homogenous, is also a huge factor, because if you don't have anybody internally in your supply chain, in your staff, in your marketing department, that can check you internally, then who's going to give you that gut check to kind of be like, I'm not sure if that's right, or maybe we should ask someone, or maybe we should, and an example of that is, I mean, clearly, Benny and I, my partner, CEO, what up, B? I know she's probably listening. We actually received it from the other end. Many people that aren't familiar with us, before we were Crowns and Hops Brewing Company, we had a lifestyle brand called Dope and Dank. We actually got a cease and desist letter from a company that owns the word dope globally. And we were forced to change our name. Granted, we fought. We lost a few stacks fighting because we felt that no one should own the word dope. We felt that no one should have the ability to bully around individuals and take sole responsibility for the word dope. But ultimately, we had to respect it because that's business. And we had to respect, and granted, we will go back. But we had to respect it, and we had to move forward, and we had to transition. We didn't kick and yell and scream about it like the cats at Evans Brewery did about that WAP can. They actually leaned into their audacity and really chose to get in back of their patrons when they were actually saying that they were okay for using WAP and the image of Cardi and Megan on their cans. So I think also what we're looking at is a lack of, or the result of a lack of diversity in the industry, because there's no checks and balances from inside versus only patrons picking up these cans because they recognize it because of nostalgia.
So looking at the two examples we put up so far, we've had that WAP can and we had, like, say, the Milk Duds version up there. In you guys' minds, is there any difference between the two?
I beat that the way I see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely IP theft. I think for me, the biggest difference is the fact that, it's punching down versus punching up, right? Like Milk Duds, Hershey's, whatever candy company, they're millionaires, billionaires, maybe, white owned, that, at the end of the day, may or may not even benefit from, the stealing of their IP. I mean, like, again, I'm not condoning it in any way, shape, or form, but, for me personally, I'm not out here to fight for Walmart. I mean, like, I'm not out here going like, oh man, you shouldn't, but when you're taking from an oppressed community, women, people of color, poor people, when you're taking from them in order to enrich, but you're not giving something back, now you're doubly shitting on those people. You see what I'm saying? Like, like you're taking their creativity, stealing their creativity, and keeping them in the dumps. You see what I'm saying? Hershey's isn't losing any money from that Milk Duds can. In fact, they got enough lawyers, if they want to go after it, they can see justice. And to a certain extent, Megan and Cardi can as well, to a certain extent, because again, they are still, women of color in a very, white male dominated justice system. So, again, it would be, some steps, but again, they still have some money, some lawyers, some representation, but, the black folks, the creative, the arts, the photographer that took that photo, that made that album cover. We don't know who that person is. That art got stolen. You know what I mean? Like, on top of Megan and Cardi and that record label, that artist that took that photo, that came up with that idea, that did that hair and makeup, they got stolen from. We don't know who they are, and they don't have any recourse to really get their money back unless, they go through, more money than they probably have at their disposal, given their profession and whatnot. And, again, time and again, you find, black people in general, being used to exploit it more or less, to sell these cans. And it kind of, for me, it also gives this sense that, there's more diversity in the industry than is actually there. So, a lot of folks are going, oh, well, like the industry can't be, racist because there's black representation on these cans. And black representation is different than exploitation. You know what I mean? And that's, that again, it's a danger for folks to see all these rap labels and go, well, I mean, clearly it's a very inclusive and welcoming, industry. But when you look at the dollars and cents, it's just not there. So, that's for me is like, again, intellectual property theft is theft. But, how it harms the people that they steal from is vastly different in my opinion.
So, Tio, I'd like to come to you on that. When is it okay to use hip hop culture on a beer label?
I think, and I can speak, from the perspective of Benny and myself. We don't own who appreciates anything. I think it's important to acknowledge that. And I'll even give a reference. Mumford Brewing in downtown LA. White owners, white brewer. Most people would immediately just assume if they put out anything hip hop that they would have no right to do it. When in fact, Todd and Peter used to own, or their family used to own, a label, or excuse me, a studio in downtown LA where Peanut Butter Wolf, Jay Dilla, some of the most important cats that contribute to hip hop recorded in. They probably have more of an affiliation to hip hop than most brothers I know. And for them not to be able to reflect culture in their artwork, would be an opportunity that they wouldn't have to showcase the culture that they were speaking as well. But what they don't do is they don't steal, regardless of their with hip hop. They do not steal direct intellectual property from someone else's in order to showcase their love for the culture. Rather, they dig into elements that maybe are far less known. For example, the concept of the butterfly scratching. What's a technique that DJs
There's a little bit of muffledness there.
Okay, sorry about that. But the concept of butterfly scratching, that's a technique that DJs use to DJ with, and anybody that knows and studies and loves hip hop will know that and see that they're doing it. They're not calling the thing DJ DMC. They're not using someone's IP in order to talk about the concepts within hip hop. And Benny and I believe the same with regards to the way that we present culture. We have a beer called Elevated Cypher. We have, which a cypher, any MC knows that once you get in a cypher, it's when freestyling just kind of becomes transcendent. I think there's appreciation. I think there's paying an ode to, and then there's theft. And I think, again, if you don't have checks and balances in the industry, then you can't. You don't have an opportunity to explore that. And that's what we ask. We don't typically just ask for people to crucify someone who uses a hip hop reference in their branding and in their packaging. But what we do ask is that people, patrons, open up dialogue and give these owners an opportunity to explain themselves, to answer questions, especially if it doesn't seem like what they're doing to generate capital is serving the very culture that they're borrowing from in order to gain leverage or present something from their brewery.
I think it's a great point when you say you should ask the owner, you should ask the people at the brewery, why they're doing this, to understand. Asking these questions is probably going to be a little uncomfortable sometimes, but I think it's really important. Does anyone have any suggestions of how you can approach these conversations when you're at a brewery? Like if I walk into a brewery, I see that massive hip hop reference on that beer menu. What's the best way for a person to begin these conversations? And I know that's a tough one, but I mean, they're tough conversations to be had.
I mean, I'm not always the best at, I ask questions. I ask hard questions. I talk to people. I get paid to, be a disruptor in a sense. As a comedian, we get paid to get on stage and ask tough questions and point things out. So, I might not be the best reference, for that, but I mean, I'll sit down at a bar and be like, so how did this come about? Just as simple as that. How did that come about? And to actually ask if, and the hardest question, as Tio said, does this give back to the culture that you're taking it from? I mean, that's really what, the issue that I had, I have with a lot of the appropriation is the fact that you're not giving back to the culture that you're taking it from. I had people say to me, I had a guy say to me, he was like, oh, well, I bought a Biggie CD when it came out. So it's part of my culture too. And I'm like, so you gave $15 to a dude, $10 then. I remember what CDs, tapes was back, $10 to a dude 30 years ago. And now you feel like you have rights to his image and likeness to sell more. Like, it seems like you got a deal because you got that CD for $10. You underpaid for it then, and now you're making even more money off of it now. It seems like you're double dipping. It seems like he gave to you both in life and in death, and you have yet to give back, to that man or the culture. You see what I'm saying? So, like my thing is, again, if you're going to use the reference, and again, like another example that Tio was saying about the guys that that helped the culture back then, they actually have helped. They've given back to the culture. They didn't just take. They had a studio. There were people that came in that were enriched as a result of their participation in the culture. You see what I'm saying? So to hark back on that and to say, well, who benefited from that? They can easily just say, well, here are the list of people that have benefited from my work in this industry and in this culture. So if you can't easily say to somebody, hey, these are the people, again, with our festival, Fresh Fest, we try to very easily, when people ask, well, who's benefiting, we could easily point to the various independent artists, Black, women, the various people that we claim to be helping and appreciate. We can very easily on any one of those cans, any one of those projects say, these are the people that are getting paid and are prospering as a result of this. Ask, where's the money at? You know what I mean? Like if you see a collaboration and it has, a dead rapper on it, one, I mean, why is it always dead rappers? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you ain't got any new ones that you listen to since then. But secondly, who's benefiting? And if you don't have anybody Black, if you don't have anybody women, if you don't have anybody in your supply chain that helped to come up with this, again, another example Tia was saying about the gin and juice label. That was probably an artist that came up and got paid to do that. That's dope. Hopefully it was a Black artist, that got paid to do that. But at least somebody was paid artistically, independently to do that or whatever. So, I mean, I think that's really the question to ask, say, hey, how did this project come about? And how are you giving back to the culture that you are utilizing in order to sell that? And if they don't have the answers to that, then, probably appropriation.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Go ahead, Tio.
No, I was going to say, trust, like from someone who started their career in the craft beer industry wearing a shirt that said Black people love beer. It pretty much invited conversations about this. And I think someone in the comment also made a reference to another beer that Mumford did. Skid Rowkey, I think was the name of it. It was a reference of Skid Row. They got checked on it. And they corrected. They understood. They corrected course. The problem is a lot of people feel like they don't need to correct their course. And that's when you have to start asking questions about, do I continue patronizing this business? And I'll be honest with you guys. I think we as a craft beer brewing company, are really, it's funny that we even second guess using our culture, our own culture, because this is what we know. This is how we grew up. This is what we listen to now. This is what we listen with our children, hip hop, how we dress, how we act, and this is the first time that we've been able to show our culture and represent ourselves. And it's funny, Benny and I were having a conversation like, damn, is this appropriation? Like, fuck that. This is who I am. Like, this is intrinsically who I am. Granted, I'm not going to go as far as to just go out and take a rapper's verse. And I'll give you an example. We had a beer collaboration that we did with El Segundo called I Gotta Get It. And originally we wanted to do I Left My Wallet. I left my wallet in El Segundo. And immediately we reached out to Tribe. We reached out to their people and we were like, this is what we're thinking, because we had a line of communication. That's another way of identifying if someone has a right. Do they have a path to the individuals who they're looking to use their actual IP with? But we reached out and they said no. They said no, we're cool. And we explained who we are. We explained what we did, and they were like, nah, unfortunately, so and so doesn't drink, so and we asked to do something a little bit more ambiguous, and they blessed it. But the bigger point is there's this audacity of just not either asking or reaching out to the people that own these IPs, partnering with these IPs to see if there's something that can be mutual, whether it's content, whether it Cardi or Megan. This is like, hey, that's a great idea. Let me get down. Like, there's opportunities there as well. But when you feel emboldened to do what the fuck you want, to just do and say and take and use what you want, it's that's entitlement, and that's where I think we need to go back to the pillars within craft beer of being community, of being creative, of being authentic, of being collaborative. Those are the reasons why I fell in love with the industry. But when it came down to culture, as I started to research and be more involved, I realized that there was zero collaboration. That there was, I can't say zero, but it was far and few between.
And we're going to dive more into that collaboration aspect in just a moment. But Dan, I'm going to come to you for a second. I'd love to hear your legal expertise on what breweries should be doing when they have an idea that may include, say, hip hop culture, or want to put a rapper's face on a can. What steps should a brewery be doing before they actually go through with this?
You need to get a ring light, Daniel, so that we can see the fullness of that beard, man.
It blends into like his neck.
I know, I got a black shirt on, it just comes right in. But no, Tio did the right thing. You reach out, contact the estate or the representative of the artist, and make sure that they're okay with it. There's I won't name names. There's a brewery in California that did they reached out to the state of a famous jazz musician, and came up with a contract to use that musician's likeness for a particular beer, and then based on who you ask, they overstepped the contract, and now they're embattled in this trademark infringement case. So I think if you want to try and use someone else's likeness or anything like that, the first step is definitely to reach out and make sure that they're okay with it. Be completely honest about what you're trying to do and what it's going to look like, and make sure that you get the go ahead. And if the representative says no, we're not okay with this, then you've got to respect that and back off. Otherwise, you could be entrenched in years of very expensive legal battle, and the winds are shifting. Trademark law is a historically very racist body of law. Things are starting to shift, so that representatives of estates, they have more authority, and they're but to sum it up, um, or starting to change, and you better make sure that you have somebody's authority to do what you want to do.
Now, Dan, your audio is a little funny there, but I want to ask a follow-up to that. We talked about different examples so far, of what might be considered appropriation. And Tio, you mentioned just using like, a reference to DJing on your label. When should you be able to do something without reaching out to, say, the lawyers, to the estates versus, blatantly putting someone's face on a label? Is there a low level of parts of pop culture that we can put on labels without having to worry about IP theft?
I think if you have to ask the question, it's probably better to err on the side of the question. The standard is going to be irreparable harm, so it's a pretty broad standard, and depending on who's interpreting it, you could be considered doing a lot of harm by using just somebody's image.
No, thanks for sharing that. We just had a question come in the comments. The question is, isn't this the time to start calling out breweries by name? Opinions on quality or flavor are one thing, but inappropriate culture appropriation should be called out. What are you three's thoughts on that?
I think it's an interesting perspective, and I struggle with it a bit because the flip side of that is some of these breweries literally have nothing, like except for the theft of the IP. So what they're doing is they're looking for attention to actually be, to be more popular, to push them. That WAP beer was one of the more popular beers that company produced. They've done a bunch of other things like Ferris Bueller knockups, Joaquin Phoenix references and shit like that. But out of all their stealing of ideas and concepts and imagery, that one was the one that popped. And it was frustrating because I knew in calling them out on our platform that immediately we were going to, because of our followership, that it was going to bring attention to them that they were looking for. And it's tough to walk that balance, which is why much of the time we'll reach out to them directly because we are in this industry as well. We're not in the industry just to, fire shots. I will also, Benny will also reach out to cats and be like, yo, like, I'm not sure where you're going with this, but, this is why we're in the industry so that we can have these conversations internally. And they did not respond. They were void of response. So that let me know immediately if they can't even respond to someone in their industry on being questioned on the use of someone's IP, then that tells me exactly where their intent is, and we lit them up. But everyone doesn't deserve that. I think there's some breweries and some companies that are doing that as a last failed ditch to try and get some dollars or get some attention. I would rather just, allow those cats just to wither away and allow for organizations like myself, organizations, that have that steeped and embodied in their culture to have an opportunity to put our culture on the map in the craft beer industry.
That's great insight right there. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, breweries that don't have that creativity, whether it's creativity in their recipes or creativity in their marketing, those are the ones that are going to struggle. And like you mentioned, Tio, it could be a last-ditch effort to draw attention to that brand. Dave, do you have any thoughts on calling out breweries? Is it something that should be done, or is there value in it? Is there a tactful way to open a conversation that way?
Yeah, no, I agree with what Tia was saying. Is that it's a case by case situation. It's like trolls. I mean, you don't give attention to every troll. I mean, that's how they feed. That's their food. But you also you have to figure out which ones. Like, you can't just ignore Donald Trump. I mean, he's the biggest troll of them all. But by ignoring him, you're allowing for the rampant destruction to continue. So I think it's a case by case situation, and figuring out who is, hopefully, what it turns into as we continue to have these conversations. First and foremost, I think that, especially as craft beer becomes more mainstream, in American, the public or whatever, more of these larger companies are probably going to start taking notice and start firing down these shots that they hadn't been doing over the last couple of decades. So you're going to see a bit more of that, especially with the blatant ones, like a milk dud. Like, I mean, I'm starting to see more articles, like about folks that are starting to, get raked over the coals from some of these larger entities because they thought they were too big to care about. But, for me, I feel like the goal is that, we continue to have these conversations. I'm not, I got more time. I got more shit to think about than this one particular issue. There's a lot of issues in America and this industry or whatever. Cultural appropriation, IP theft is just one of them. I can't spend my whole time calling out every biggie label that I see. But, the more egregious ones, yeah, some more of the ones that are coming to my attention. Yeah, but the goal is that, people in general will start to see these and say, I'm not going to support that because that's bullshit, and it doesn't have to be a case by case situation where we're going around and every time something happens, we're having this big raw. Hopefully, eventually it'll just be one of those things that are frowned upon. And people just go, like serving old beer or some shit like that. You know what I mean? Like, not putting your dates at the bottom of the can. Hopefully it's one of those things that'll, be frowned upon that eventually will be pushed out. And only you'll see in small pockets of, white America that is happening. But, like I said, I mean, calling out every last one of them is tedious. But making examples, of the more egregious folks, I think is where the effort should be.
No, good insight there. And Dan, from a legal perspective, is there any risk when someone does call out someone publicly for claiming to do something? Dan, are you frozen? Are you there? I think Dan and his fantastic beard are just frozen in the ether with us right now.
I wanted to add a little something as Dan comes out of being a Lego person. I think one of the things that you also have to consider is that right now, as Black-owned businesses that are finally starting to access the resources in order to showcase our culture in different industries, we have not had that ability to do so in many cases. I love that comment that Dave mentioned about punching up versus punching down. The likelihood that Milk Duds is going to sell more Milk Duds because of a Milk Dud beer is high. The likelihood that someone is going to sell more records or is going to, have something that affects and impacts the Black culture, outside of them putting it on their cans to make a profit, is low. And I think that's what we're starting to see now. We're starting to see the fact that we, unfortunately, due to systemic racism, have not been afforded the same opportunities to leverage our culture. And I think there's a term called cultural capital that's starting to really kind of take heed. The culture of hip hop has driven more brands and continues to drive more brands globally than any culture on the planet. You could turn on your TV right now, and I promise you, if not every commercial that comes on, there will be a hip hop track or something resembling hip hop. From hamsters dancing to it to the AT&T girl breakdancing or Flo doing something. Hip hop in some instances is bigger than religion on this planet. And I think the true sign of the end of systemic racism and white supremacy is Black people being able to use Black shit to come up. Straight up. I wish I'm not going to deliver this perfect. I'm not, and we don't speak for all Black people on this planet, but I can tell you for sure that people are going to start to understand the aspects of hip hop, of jazz, of DJing, of dance, as I understood them, as I was taught by my grandparents and my great grandfather, and then we're going to speak about things like agriculture. We're going to speak about things outside of just what's obvious, because Black people are not monolithic. But I don't want to, I just kind of wanted to give some context on the fact that, look, we don't have the solve for everybody, and maybe the answers may not be perfect, but I can tell you right now, this is a moment in time where we can finally lean into our Blackness, or authenticity and leverage that shit in order to get some ground in this country.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of head nods going on right now. I 100% agree with you. I think this is an opportunity to educate and build relationships for sure. And Dan, if your audio is good, I want to go back to you for a sec. Can you hear me, Dan? Okay. Dan, we can't hear you so well, so we're going to go to the next topic. I'm sorry about that. It's just your audio is really slightly glitchy. Sorry for that. But, you know, T.O., Day, and Dan, I want to kind of go to a positive from here because, T.O., you kind of just started to lean into it yourself just now. We can use this as an opportunity. How can breweries, you know, instead of blatantly putting a dead rapper on a label, how can they form relationships with their local hip hop community, their local Black community, people who they, you know, aren't necessarily coming to their brewery right now, but what are the positives we can see from this? And Day, I mean, you're a great example of this. Your Fresh Fest is bringing people together who might not be, you know, in the craft beer world very much, but teaching them about craft beer and people learning from one another of how we can make our industry stronger. So everybody here today, well, how can we use this truly as an opportunity to grow craft beer by, you know, teaching more people and making our industry more diverse?
I mean, you know, it's. I think you got to keep doing this what you're doing. I mean, all these breweries are already reaching out to people in the community. They hire you know, musicians to come out and play at their breweries. They hire artists to design their logos to, you know, paint their walls. They hire, you know, hop farmers and growers to do these things. All right, now you just put intention on it and you add Black to it. Now it's okay, you know, since you love Black culture so much, or, you know, whatever, like, you know, since you love America, because I think a lot of people forget that Black is also American. In fact, America wouldn't be here without us and the unpaid labor that we put into this country for so long. So, you know, if you love America, why not reach out to all of America? If you're looking at the people that you're paying to make your brewery successful and they all look like you, then it's just a matter of intentionally going to the interwebs and going to people and saying, okay, well, where are all the Black folks that are in my supply chain or in my, you know, in my bubble, in my ecosphere? I mean, like, you know, breweries are great community, you know, community like cultural centers. You know, I mean, and bars have always been that. Watering holes, you know, Cheers and all that. You know, they've always been a place where people, you know, the community comes by and has a drink and everybody knows your name and all that. You know, I guess the issue is that, you know, racism and sexism and all these, you know, various bigotries that make it a boys club, that make it a moose club, that make it a white, you know, male only type of atmosphere. So, you know, you already have it's not like you have to put more money into what you're doing. A lot of people have this fear that, like, oh, well, if I want to incorporate Black people or women, or, you know, or people of color, or this and the other, I got to like spend more money and time. And it's like, I mean, you might have to spend a little bit more time to seek it out, but the money is the same. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's just a matter of, instead of hiring that, you know, that one, you know, like acoustic guitar dude that, you know, like that plays or whatever, like, you know, hire a DJ to come in. I mean, the rates are similar. I'm a producer of events. I know what the rates look like. I've hired people from all over the spectrum. The differences aren't much. You know what I mean? And it's not that hard. I mean, this whole directories and inventories and agencies that'll do these things for you. I mean, it's just a matter of intentionality and just doing it with the purpose of saying, I'm going to do that, rather than, you know, being, you know, having blinders on through privilege.
And Day, in a past conversation we had, you made a really interesting point, and you simply said Black people have money too. And that kind of stuck with me because, you know, you want to make a difference in the industry, but money motivates, and craft beer is a business. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, I mean, I think what the sales, craft beer sales right now are like 13 or 14% Black. You know what I mean? So, you know, like, so it's not like we're not spending the money on craft beer. People always make the, you know, what if people don't, you know, Black people don't like beer? That's not what the numbers are saying. That's not what that's not at all what I've seen. That's not at all what any of your, you know, that's not what Anheuser-Busch has seen. That's not what Miller Coors has seen. I mean, Black people clearly enjoy beer. I mean, like, you know, Black people like have money to spend. And I mean, I'm Black and I have, you know, like, it's not, it doesn't need to be anecdotal. You know, the the spending power that's in the Black community is very known by the larger white community. The problem is that the larger white community only wants the dollars. They don't want to empower the Black community through that, and it's a one-way street. And again, and that's where this cultural appropriation and theft again goes back into the whole, hey, it's a one-way street. You're just taking, and you're not giving anything back. And again, I was comment the other day was like, oh well, how do you get people excited about craft beer? And it's like, it's the same way that white people got excited about craft beer, is they got paid for it. You know what I mean? Like, people get excited about craft beer because they know the people that they're spending their money with. They know that the money is staying in their community. They feel as if they're empowering somebody locally. That's what brought people. And in fact, like the name craft is highly disputed because of the sole fact of who it empowers. Who it empowers economically. Craft. The difference between craft and mass is that the guy. It's local. You could track the dollar and that ecosphere. Whereas once you spend it on Anheuser, I've never met Anheuser or Busch or Miller or Coors. You see what I'm saying? So to tout that, like, oh, we only love it because of all these flavors and beers and this, that, and the other. If that was the case, then you wouldn't care when Anheuser-Busch bought up Goose and started doing the same shit. You wouldn't care when all of these little breweries got bought up by the big guys because they're making the same shit. You care because the economic part of that has changed. So when you start talking about, why Black people aren't all that into beer, craft beer, you have to ask, well, what's craft about beer for Black people? And if you can't identify any Black people in your management, in your supply chain that are being empowered by this, then it's not craft beer for them. If I as a Black person is going into a brewery, a small locally owned brewery, and none of those dollars are empowering me or my community, that's not craft for me. That's just as nice as any other beer that I'd be getting.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, it's one of the things that Benny and I have been really focused on in terms of this conversation around diversity and inclusion. Once we realized that not to shit on anybody that's focused on that and that has that as the premise of their title or their efforts, but we realized what we needed to accomplish in this industry was racial equity. And that's about empowerment. That's about being able to have the resources in order to provide parity, to provide a different point of view with regards to who else is contributing to this industry. Racial equity is a strategy for economic growth. It's not a zero-sum game. You don't lose by someone else winning. And I think up until this point, that is what the industry has looked at diversity and inclusion efforts as a means to tear down white guys. Like that is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is giving resources and empowerment to someone and to a group of individuals who can expand and expound upon the industry. Because the reality is as soon as someone has a Crowns and Hops beer and God willing, their experience is fantastic, they're not just going to stop at Crowns and Hops. They're going to go to the next brewery. They're going to go to the next, their buddy's favorite brewery. It expands the industry. So what we talk about, and shout out real quick, I got to give a shout out to the Kellogg Foundation, who actually has it's the National Day of Racial Healing, which is taking part today at 12 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. They were the inspiration behind the 8 Trill Pills effort that we put together, which is an effort focused on racial equity in craft beer. But ultimately, when we read their business case, which was a business case for racial equity that they published a few years ago, we realized that there was language that we can put with empowering people, empowering communities that otherwise weren't and did not have access to the same resources that others had in order to capitalize on their culture and or leverage their experience for their profit and for the legacy building in their community. So, I think really it's a conversation around racial equity and allowing individuals to leverage their culture for once, specifically in the Black community.
No, thank you for all that. I want to throw out one more question. We kind of had it in the comments right here. We talk a lot about what breweries can do, but what type of examples or policies can, say, guilds, organizations, even people like us here in Craft Beer Professionals, what can we do to help monitor cultural appropriation or sexist actions on beer labels, just to do our part to make the industry better? Is there something you'd like to see industry leaders do to help, facilitate the industry in a better direction?
Briefly, I'll just say people need to stop turning a blind eye, and I think if your gut says that something may be appropriation, that it is on the onus of the very community that empowers and supports these breweries to also check these breweries and ensure that they're going about this the right way, because that's what's not happening. And I think there's this artificial feeling of my hometown brewery has a right to do it, and no one's even asking why. So I think it's more about patrons being critical of their breweries more than anything, versus Black people always having to be the ones to be the national checkers of appropriation.
Yeah, 100%. It's all about asking questions and starting these conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's much like terrorism in America. I mean, we love America and we want to fight terrorism, but it takes us all of us. So if you see something, say something. So it's the same thing. You see something, say something. And it doesn't have to be a large public post. It doesn't have to be all like messy or whatever. You could just like Tio said, you could reach out. You could just be at the bar, across from the owner, have a conversation. It might be that they didn't know. 2021. All the shit going on, maybe they just hadn't seen it or whatever, maybe they hadn't crossed. It might be something as simple as that, but see something, say something, and speak with your dollars. If you don't like it, don't buy it. If you see repeated offenses, then speak with your dollars and don't support that, and that might be hard. They might be a good brewery that you like, but if they're doing something that is, and I just want to be clear, that's ultimately hurting the industry as a whole, right? The industry, much like all other industries, after they have cannibalized white dollars after so long, they start to go after other communities. They typically do this in a very predatory manner because their business, the profits plateau. There's only but so much that you can. There's only but so much beer that white men can buy. So if you're going to expand the industry as a whole, you need more people to come in, and you need more people to come in equitably. So if you're going to do that, then you need to check the people who are making it difficult for that industry to expand. So if you genuinely love craft beer as an industry, as an art form, then you need to protect it the same way that you would protect, say, your country that you know and love. You see something, you say something, and you speak with your dollars.
And I've had countless conversations with people like you guys and others just in the industry today. And the consumers, they're going to support breweries that they respect. And everybody's making great beer right now. We all got that under check. So if you're not making great beer, we already got a problem. But people are going to support the breweries where they respect their. Well, they're not going to last long, Tio. So I think we've got that. The checks and balances are going to work themselves out right there. But, people support breweries that they respect, and respect goes a long way. And one way you can gain that respect from your consumers, lack of a better way to put it, is not doing stupid shit like this. If you can't speak to it, don't do it. And Tio, I believe you used that quote when we spoke the other day. And I think it's so important. If you can just gain that respect from your consumers, you are going to grow. You're going to approach those, demographics who weren't coming to your brewery because they're going to see you as authentic. And I think authentic is how you build successful communities in craft beer these days.
And real quick, I just want to acknowledge this one moment real quick, and I'll make it very brief. But the last Fresh Fest that we had, it was interesting because there was music going on, and the Fresh Fest was pumping, and out of nowhere, this mob of white people started coming over. They literally were leaving the convention and the festival that they were at so that they could come to this Black beer festival, and it was the most beautiful moment because you saw the impact of having this festival that was steeped in culture, steeped in Black brewers and breweries and enthusiasts, and how it was just a magnet for individuals to find community. And I just wanted to acknowledge that real quick because what Day created over there is really special, brother. I miss it.
Man, Day, I can't wait to enjoy a beer with you guys in person. That's gonna be a good day when we all get to do that.
Yeah, we'll be back. We'll be back this year. Yeah, details coming soon. We'll be on the horn.
No, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, so as we wind down this, I think this conversation is extremely important. The three of you have brought out fantastic insight of, why we have this problem, what we can do to better it. Because at the end of the day, the good of our industry wants a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable industry. And I think the good ones, the ones who are making great beer with great mission statements, that's what we're all fighting for. Does anybody have any final words they'd like to throw in? Just something motivational, positive, keep this thing going in the right direction? Now, Dan, I know you've been in and out. Do you have any final thoughts from your perspective on what breweries can do better?
If you can hear me, I think the most important thing is, if you, at a guild level, you got to make sure these conversations keep happening. At a brewery level, if you are thinking about doing something, it doesn't hurt to reach out first. To make sure that what you're doing is okay with who actually holds the rights to that. And if you're a patron, it doesn't hurt to reach out privately first. And once you know all the facts and you want to go forward and say something publicly, absolutely do so. This is an important conversation, and we all have to do our part to make sure it keeps happening.
Thanks, Dan.
I think for me, I think people need to really focus on the action items as it relates to doing the work. I think, a lot of people have been hearing that comment, and I think people need to understand that the work is something that we have to do every day. I think, ultimately a lot of things that we're dealing with in this country right now are related to systemic racism. But I feel like we can all take small steps in our own way. We have to remember that those steps have to be consistent. It took us 400 years to get in this mess. We're not gonna unstick ourselves out of this mess just based off of 1 year under a pandemic as it relates to actionable steps to get better. And people just have to remember that this is a plan for economic success for all of us when we allow for individuals to lean into their own cultures. I love being able to dip into a surf culture or a rock culture and all that stuff, but also want to dip and celebrate and exalt authentic hip hop culture and Black culture and African culture as well. And that's what we represent. So the last thing I'll say is you guys can tune in to the National Day of Racial Healing. Go to the Kellogg Foundation if you need action item steps to start a conversation about race, about appropriation. They have toolkits that you can download and give to your favorite breweries or your the job that you work at. So there's steps that can be taken. People aren't inventing this shit out of nowhere just because of the moment. There have been way more intelligent people than myself and us on this panel that have been working on this problem. So access it and take action.
No, I love it. And Tio, I love those words. I love how you mentioned just the educational and community aspects of craft beer, because one of my favorite things about craft beer, I love learning about beer, but I love learning about people too. I love learning the brewery's story. I love learning about you. I love learning about Day. I love learning about Dan. It's these conversations with one another that are so vital. We talk about craft beer and we say community so much. It's not truly a community until it represents the actual community around that brewery. And I think that's really what we're working for. Yeah. Cheers to that. That's what we're working for. Day, leave us with some wisdom before we sign off.
I just, last month I was on a conference with Benny, Tio's partner, and it was through the Brewbound. We were judging a competition, and some of the beers that came through there were phenomenal. And I remember when we started Fresh Fest, I was saying, I want to see how not only the Black culture and community expresses themselves through beer, but what would it be like if if the Chinese and the Koreans got in and sort of using some of their flavors from that, that they use at home in their cooking, the Indians, the South Africans, the Haitians, all these different cultures getting in. And I got a taste of that, in judging that event, using some really crazy ingredients that, seemed weird, but came out amazing. And, I'm looking forward to more of that. It just, as an industry, the thing that I love so much about it, again, is the economic empowerment, through craft, but also the diversity and the flavors and whatnot. And, the industry only is better. If you are really a true fan of art in any genre, you're appreciative of collaborations, and true collaborations that help to uplift the cultures that you're collaborating with. So I'm very excited that folks like Teal and Benny are out there still doing the work on that side of things, and excited to see what they come up with in the future. And generally, I think that we're moving in a good direction. A lot of these conversations weren't had years ago, and now we're having them on a pretty regular basis. So I think that's a positive that's coming out of this. And we'll definitely be festing again in person this year, and I'm super excited to see what Crown and Hops comes with this year, because they definitely they kicked early last year, and I was a little too busy to actually get to the keg. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna be first in line this year. You know what I mean, with it. So looking forward to just
we got you, Day. We got you, Day.
Yeah, looking forward to being the first in line this year, and just splitting some beers with some folks. But do what we need to do: stay inside, get vaccinated, and we'll eventually get on the other side.
No, I love it, Dave. I would like to thank all three of you for just sharing your insight today. We need these conversations. I mean, we're all here for the beer, but let's make our community better just by doing it together. So T.O., Day, and Dan, thanks again, everybody. Thanks for listening. These conversations are important. Start them at your local brewery, your bar, your friends, your restaurants, wherever you go. And like Dave said, be safe and get vaccinated. So everybody, we'll see you soon, hopefully in person.